Sooner Nation, welcome in your new community, your new players for 2022. It's National Signing Day, one of the most important days on the college football calendar, and we will talk it up for the next hour here at the Voice of College Football OU. Please subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football Oklahoma. Hit that like button and settle in for the next hour. Invite your family and friends to talk Sooners football. The guy that makes it all happen here is Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football for 35 consecutive weeks. And this one extra important, extra special. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So, of course, the Sooners took a bit of a hit with Lincoln Riley moving on to Oklahoma. The typical fallout that we see everywhere when a coach leaves. Nothing really to be that alarmed about, but it's still concerning and it's still an issue in the immediacy of National Signing Day coming up in just a few weeks. But Brent Venables has quickly recovered and is starting to get back some players and in some new players as well just here in the last few days.
No, yeah, absolutely, Mark. And I think, to your point, when Riley was still here, Oklahoma was, hovering around the anywhere from the 5 to 7 range in terms of what this class would look like. And then, obviously with everything happened, they had a host of decommitments. Dropped, according to the 247 composite rankings, dropped as far as about 21st overall. But to your point, Mark, there's been about over the last week or so since Venables has kind of got on the recruiting trail, I should say. Oklahoma secured about 4 or 5 commitments that have come through today that have got Oklahoma at this point back into the top 10. So just an outstanding job by Venables and the staff, and not just Venables, but DeMarco Murray, Cale Gundy was a couple of the guys that really kind of stayed and then stayed on the beaten path, and just in terms of trying to help kind of solidify some of these kids. And then certainly Bob Stoops was helpful in that manner as well. But and then Brent kind of closing the deal on some of these things. But yeah, I think given where Oklahoma fell to and then where they're currently at, then I think absolutely this is as good as you could hope for. Oklahoma has a couple of kids that probably won't be signing today that are looking towards maybe the later signing period, and then there's a potential flip from Clemson that it's looking like it's headed towards Oklahoma's way that could give Oklahoma a bolster that class even more than it already is.
Welcome in, everyone. Please leave your comments and your questions here on a very special day as we provide our National Signing Day special with Jason Ray and catch his work at Last Word on College Football, as Oklahoma currently sits at number 2 in the Big 12, number 10 overall. So Brent Venables again and company have recovered rather well with 13 signed letters of intent, according to 247 Sports right now. So, Jason, I guess the question is for the remainder of today through the rest of the week, because this signing period lasts for 3 days and then possibly on into February. Who are those names? What are those positions? What do you think possibly could be coming down the pike?
Yeah, so let's start with some of the kids that, as you mentioned at the top here, Martha, Oklahoma has gotten over the last couple of days, over the last week. That's really been beneficial. Kobe McKenzie is a guy that had been committed to Oklahoma for a couple of years. Flipped to Texas after everything kind of went down with Riley. This was for the most part, this was Venables' number one priority, trying to get him recommitted to Oklahoma, especially a kid that's been committed for so long. So, got him recommitted a couple of days ago. So that was really big on the defensive side of the ball. And then, as you mentioned, 2 offensive players that were. One that was previously committed to Florida, quarterback Nick Evers, 4-star dual threat guy out of Flower Mound, Texas, coming to Oklahoma. Obviously, Oklahoma did not have a quarterback targeted, or obviously didn't have a quarterback committed to this 2022 class. So getting him to getting him over to Oklahoma was huge from a depth perspective, specifically with Spencer Rattler leaving and not necessarily knowing what's in the future for Caleb Williams in terms of next year. So that was good. Jaden Gibson was a 4-star wide receiver, tall kid, 6'5", from Florida that Oklahoma was able to get in late in the period, and obviously he visited last weekend, had a great visit, so they Oklahoma was able to get his services. So those three right there, Mark, were big. I think a kid that's been committed to Oklahoma for a while, Gavin Salchuk, really is the top rated recruit that Oklahoma has right now. Running back, Oklahoma has had some anxiety over the last couple of national signing days with running backs, just a couple of that have slipped through the cracks. So he's remained committed to Oklahoma throughout this process, and then certainly confirm that today with his signing. A couple of the guys that haven't signed yet, Caden Helms is a tight end out of Nebraska. He's actually signing tomorrow, so no real concern with that, Mark. Just in terms of it's just kind of on how he wants to do his announcement. And then the other one that's a little bit in limbo, I think that's got a few people nervous is local product Gentry Williams. He mentioned a couple of days ago that he's not going to sign early. He felt like he needed a little bit more time to get to know the staff, get to know Coach Venables, and just understand exactly what the momentum of the program is before signing. So I think they're still at 15. There's one kid, Jaron Canick, who had been a commitment, 6'2", 6'3", 220. He's described as an athlete, 4-star guy who's out of Hays, Kansas. He has been committed to Clemson for quite some time. There's a lot of crystal ball projections today that he has indeed flipped from Kansas from Clemson to Oklahoma. So he's probably a linebacker in Venables' scheme. So that would be another a huge guy. There's some rumor Javante Barnes is a running back out of Las Vegas. That's a guy that DeMarco Murray has been big on for a while. There's some thoughts that he probably won't announce until the All-Star game, but there's hearing some rumors that he may have already signed, but just obviously wants to be able to have that announcement, I believe, at the Under Armour All-Star game. So yeah, with all those, if those things continue to happen the way that they do, and who knows, getting into this late a little bit, Mark, it could be a situation where Oklahoma gets a couple of kids in the late signing period that maybe they weren't expecting, that they're able to either flip or kind of talk into to coming, that were they're on the fence. So yeah, with all of those things said, it is just really a great job by Venables and still his incomplete staff at this point, at least publicly, on recruiting, really just kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit, but just doing a really good job in getting Oklahoma where they needed to be, which at some point looked like a bit of a disaster with this 2022 class.
Jason, one of the last points you made is something that we've discussed with other shows where there is a new coach and new coaching staff in place, and that's the idea that, okay, there was this sudden change. There was a program that was in limbo in a certain extent because of no head coach for a series of days. And therefore, there were a number of commits that were attached to possibly the previous coaching staff. Or maybe they are more attached to the university, but want to wait and see who the new head coach and coaching staff is going to be, and have either decommitted or are just waiting and seeing. And there being that tenuous time in the gap, where now that a coach is in place, and it's been about a week to 10 days that Brent Venables has been the Oklahoma coach. Mm-hmm. that maybe there's a possibility that there may be some players that had considered Oklahoma, then maybe were lured to some other situations, and may not completely flip to an Oklahoma, but at the same time may extend their consideration into February. And that may be a kind of win, or at least leave open a possibility for a particular player to make that decision eventually. And it's almost a win at this point that Oklahoma didn't lose them. And I'm not speaking specifically to Oklahoma's situation. I'm applying this to some other head coaching changes that I know of, where the thought process was we had this player at one point, we switched coaches, we lost this player, and now just the fact that the new head coach and coaching staff is able to get back in the conversation and extend them out maybe through the rest of this week or into February is a positive, that we're back into under consideration and they're not signing with anybody else.
No, that's a great point, Mark. I mean, I think, for everything that I know in terms of Oklahoma's situation, I think they've been able to do exactly what you'd mentioned. Either have been in position to flip them either back to Oklahoma, or now considering Oklahoma. There's a couple of there's a couple of 3-star guys that Oklahoma got here later on that I think really is just kind of adding depth. But I think to your point, and there might be some guys out there that Oklahoma's still targeting that really isn't necessarily somebody that they were targeting previously under the previous coaching staff, that may, to your point, may have a different kind of discussion internally in terms of, hey, this might be a situation where I'm looking to maybe just wait it out to the late signing period to see what happens. Like I said, Oklahoma still has a couple of position coaches that they haven't hired yet. So maybe there's some, either on the defensive line or in the secondary type of situation where Oklahoma or some of those kids are waiting to see exactly who those guys are before they make one of these decisions that maybe not necessarily they regret, but they want to make a full, very thought out decision on what's best for them going forward.
We've got about 260 folks on the line. We apologize for the beginning of the show, and we appreciate everybody being patient and waiting. It's just a situation where, a very odd situation. We've done 35 of these shows, and Jason's been on probably another 50 times. And for some reason, the link was not getting to him on certain devices. So we had a miscommunication there where technology let us down, and the link was not being sent correctly. So that's why we were about 20 minutes late. So we appreciate everybody being here. We've got a question coming in from Doug, and he's asking about Jaron Kanik. So I've looked him up. He is a Clemson hard commit. There's the obvious connection there with Venables moving from Clemson to OU. Again, he's a hard commit, but not a signee at this point. A 10th rated athlete. That's actually from more of Oklahoma's portion of the country, number 1 rated player in the state of Kansas and a top 250 player. Did we know anything about his possible flip?
Yeah, so he was the guy, Martha, that I had mentioned a little bit earlier. That was the guy that potentially could be a flip. Yeah, I think there was some thoughts initially when Venables got the job. He had made some tweets, and just there's some thoughts out there that he may be looking to follow. Hadn't really heard a ton about him, just some rumors, not any substantial. But Steve Wiltfong actually crystal balled him to Oklahoma this morning. So he hasn't made an announcement. He's one of the guys, like I said, wasn't necessarily on my radar, so I don't know if he'll be committing over the next couple of days or something, where he will he will wait till the later period to actually sign. But I think one thing that was interesting is Clemson had about 13 guys on their list that were planned to commit today and sign, and Dabo had talked about 12 of those signing today, and that's about all that they would get. And Jaron hasn't actually even hasn't signed anywhere else. So I think there's a lot of probably legs to that rumor. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to follow over the next couple of days, or really just making sure that just seeing if he if we get something on the Oklahoma side here the next couple of days, or how that kind of goes through the late signing period as well.
Jackson's making a comment basically saying, I feel as though if this is the worst Brent Venables is going to do, then he could really tear up the recruiting path for the next 5 years. And I think, to your point, Jason, and a lot of things that you've outlined, he's recovered extremely well. He still has a top 10 class in place, even after all the transition and everything he had to recover from. He's pulling this together rather quickly and even going out and getting some additional guys that we're not considering Oklahoma.
No, I think that's fair, Mark and Jackson, for the thought and the question. Yeah, I mean, Venables was a dynamic recruiter when he was here. Previously, he's even gotten better as a just as a recruiter at his time at Clemson, and Oklahoma's got some good recruiters on staff. Just all across the board, I think Oklahoma has got the people, whether it be local or the ties across the ACC, SEC. Um, Country that will help Oklahoma get into areas that they haven't necessarily been in before. So I think, yeah, I mean, who knows what the future holds, but I would expect Oklahoma to continue to have top 10 classes, as long as the success translates on the field as most would expect that it would.
Yes, Gabriel Brownlow Dindy is officially on the Texas A&M signed list, so he is a Aggie. And so that has transpired. Xavier Bryce, Biggie is telling us, has flipped to Texas this morning.
Yeah, he has. That was a little unexpected. I mean, I don't know that that's just a huge blow for Oklahoma right now. But yeah, he was a kid that had been committed to Oklahoma for quite some time. Texas, I mean, for all the lack of success that they've had, specifically this year, they've done a great job. I think they're in the top 5, top 6 right now, in the 2022 composite rankings. So I think part of it, what we're seeing across the board, Mark, is, I mean, and we haven't even touched on the Jackson State situation, but what we're seeing is right now, I think what we're seeing a lot of is NIL. We know the impact that it's made from a transfer perspective, but I think what more we're seeing right now today is how big of an impact it's making on the recruiting trail, specifically Texas. Texas has a very, very lucrative NIL deal, specifically on the lineman side of things. So they have hauled in a ton of offensive and defensive linemen as part of this class. And I think I saw a tweet earlier, from a national guy, is that we thought that the NIL was going to really, really benefit the halves. But it's when you got an FCS team that has gained the commitment of a number one overall player in the country, it's there's something. It's a much different ball game than it's ever been, I think, on the recruiting side of things.
So before we get to exactly that, yes, this NIL situation has only been in place since July 1st. So we're 6 months into it, and it has quickly gone from a situation in which players have that freedom and they can connect with and contact various companies and entities that will, of course, be contacting the best of the best and going after them, or it's your local sub shop or whomever, to an institution now formalizing this, whether that's Texas and the various superpowers, more formalizing this and being able to secure more prominent, secure overriding deals of mega dollars. And so that's taken it to another level. Now, what you just brought up concerning, just think about this. Think about our college football world prior to 6 months ago, or prior to, in this instance, today. Who would have ever thought that Jackson State could sign the number one ranked player in the country? So Travis Hunter is the number one rated defensive back, could play some wide receiver, number one rated player in the country. He's out of Georgia. Based on everything that I know, and I've been in a situation doing a Florida State show every week for like a year and a half with Florida State insiders, is that I know quite a bit about Travis Hunter. Not that I've personally studied him, but I know some more insider type information just about the story, the journey, and his love of Florida State football. It's all over his house. You know, he's just been committed to Florida State. It's not been a question. There's just not been, again, a doubt, regardless of their issues on the field, that he is a Florida State guy. Well, maybe one of the reasons why he's a Florida State guy is he's a Deion Sanders guy.
Yeah.
So he has been idolizing Deion Sanders his whole life, and Florida State in particular, or more broadly. So what has happened has, I believe, been completely unexpected by anybody, that he flips his commit on National Signing Day this morning from Florida State to Jackson State and Deion Sanders. And wow, that's just, it's stunning.
It is. I mean, and for me, Mark, anytime you see and I don't follow Florida State recruiting to that level to know how long Travis Hunter had actually been, committed to. But when you see a kid that has been committed to a school and then all of a sudden flips on signing day, I mean, and it happens a lot. I mean, you have to wonder what the reason is, right? So, whether it's NIL or whether it's something worse than NIL, that's happening. So that's happening there. It's college football now. I mean, like it or not, whether it's like I said, whether it's the recruiting game, whether it's a transfer portal or whatever it is, that's the game. It's turned a little bit into a NFL junior league, which it is what it is. I mean, to a certain extent, but it's the way it's the momentum of the game, or of the college game in itself. So yeah, I mean, it's very. I mean, it's going to get. I'm not saying it's necessarily horrible for the sport, but I think that it's the momentum of the sport with NIL and with other things that kind of happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm trying to find exactly when he committed to Florida State, but it's been forever.
Yeah, I saw
It's
a comment here that someone said 2 years. So I don't know how accurate that is, but
okay. So it's been a long time. I'm on 247 Sports right now. Like, he was so entrenched in Florida State football. Like, I can't even find his commitment, because basically his timeline on 247 Sports is filled with nothing but visiting Florida State after his commitment. Like, he has actively recruited other players to Florida State. Like, he has been on the campaign recruiting players to Florida State. He's been at all their camps, their spring games, their games. He's been on campus constantly, like practically like he's a member of the Florida State football team already. And then all of a sudden on National Signing Day, he flips.
yeah. I don't. It's bizarre, Mark. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's not bizarre. It's like it's what um, it's just the momentum of the college game right now. Unfortunately, that's for whatever it is. A lot of people talk about. I mean, I think there's some questions in there, talk about whether or not what are is Oklahoma going to start paying players? Essentially, are they going to start paying this? And we know under the table, there's obviously this stuff goes on. There's some legality with it, obviously under NIL. But I think the one thing that Venables was very clear on is he wants to recruit kids that want to be at Oklahoma. And I'm not saying Oklahoma's not doing this, Mark. I mean, to to a certain degree, every blue blood team is doing something like this to, to keep to keep a competitive advantage over over the teams that you're recruiting against. I mean, you have to. But I think you're going to see Oklahoma with a lot of guys that maybe truly, really, really want to be here, and want to be part of this program. But it's a bizarre world of college football right now, where NIL and money seems to be the prevailing factor.
Travis Hunter is 3 months shy of being committed to Florida State for 2 years, March of 2020. So for 21 months, he's been committed to Florida State. And again, this wasn't just he committed on Twitter and then you never heard another thing. Like, he's been invested in the program. Okay, enough Travis Hunter, because this is about Oklahoma. But so what I'm envisioning when you talk about all that is that, okay, we've got NIL, and above board, it is what it is in regards to individual companies being able to pursue college athletes, or the athletes themselves pursuing opportunities, and companies in which can pay them whatever for whatever services, sign autographs, put your face on a tweet, all those different things. Okay. At whatever pay. And to me, I think there are a number of ways in which we've discussed right here that can hurt the game, but I have no issue with it. It's the American way. It's capitalism. They get to earn a buck just like I do,
Right.
and you do. So I have no issue with it, and I think it benefits the individual. Unfortunately, it can affect other things. So the way in which an institution now can, I guess, be more underhanded and camouflage payments to players is, let's say the NIL deals aren't sweet enough, or they're able to supplement NIL deals. Let's say they get $1 million contract from company X, but they don't believe that that's going to be enough with the number of players involved and everything, that they can kind of funnel money into that's going to be difficult to detect. And they can, in a roundabout way, pay players and ensure players coming to the university. I'm not saying that happens, but that's kind of how I envision that happening.
No, I think you're right, Mark. I mean, it's not, anymore, especially at Oklahoma or wherever. It's not necessarily about the tradition. It's not necessarily about your wins and losses on the field. It's not necessarily about your national championships. How many, what do you put yourself in position to win a national championship? To your exactly what you mentioned. It's more about, number one, what program do I, as a player, do I feel that is going to put me in the best position, to take care of my mom, my dad, start my next, the next journey in my life. And part of this NIL is stockpiling that. I mean, you've got to think about this from a kid's perspective. If I'm a kid and maybe I see an opportunity to help my own situation, help my parents even more so early on than I would before. Then yeah, I mean, if you're a kid, you're absolutely gonna jump at this. So I think where Oklahoma has to do, maybe, and I don't know that I would necessarily say maybe a better job, because this recruiting period was so, I think, it's so difficult for Oklahoma, just based on everything that's happened. But going forward next year, yeah, I think that you've got to understand, and you've got to put yourself in a position that the NIL deals need to be, um, as lucrative as the other ones. It used to be, Mark, that you would compete with a lot of these other programs from a facilities perspective, right? So you have to have, whether it's weight room, whether it's stadium, whether it's workout room, all the amenities that these kids enjoy. Now that's still important, but I think we're getting to a position where the NIL deals, setups within the program itself and what's available to them, locally within Oklahoma or even nationally in some of these other cases that some of these are kids that are big national names are going to be extremely important. And we've talked about the free agency, and it really is what it is. You bring these kids in and you do everything that you can to woo them in many different ways than you have before. And even the transfer portal, that's even more of a second kind of area of the free agency. You got one stab at it if the kids aren't if the kids aren't happy. Then you've got another opportunity. Look at look at Quinn Ewers has moved on from Tech or from Ohio State to Texas. Didn't even give himself an opportunity to play at Ohio State, right? I mean, obviously he knew that he saw the writing on the wall that with Stroud there he probably wasn't going to play within the next couple of years. Still, having said that, he came in early and never gave the situation even an opportunity. So, I mean, there'll be a lot of kids that have that same, maybe not at that same level, but have that same thought process. I give it 6 months. If I'm not playing or I don't see myself getting significant playing time, I'm going to make the decision to go play elsewhere.
Yeah, there's so many ways to go with this. The one comment I'll make in regards to facilities is these facilities can only be so plush. I think we've reached a place where I've seen facility draw ups, mock-ups at places like Illinois and Minnesota and Northwestern that you wouldn't even consider to be near the elite of college football, and they're beyond beautiful, have everything that you could possibly want, every amenity, everything. Like, I think we've reached a place where there's about 50 schools in this country that have thrown money into facilities to the point where I don't know that you could go to Illinois versus Ohio State and say, well, Ohio State clearly still has just this amazing facility. That even the Illinois, Minnesota level are stockpiling facilities in beautiful fashion to where it's like, okay, everybody's got the facilities. That's almost like now a ground floor baseline requirement. And then to your point about NIL, my goodness, the power in this sport has flipped on its head from these players. They were still in a good position, receiving a scholarship, being treated extremely well at these universities, but they didn't have much freedom, to where, it's being compared to NFL free agency, but it's 10 times that. I'm going to guess that 10 or 15% of the players in the NFL at any given time are free agents. They're mostly under contract. They're signing 2, 3, 4-year contracts. If they're a big time player, 7, 8-year contract. And so I'm guessing like 10 to 15% of the league in any given off season are free agents. And there's a restricted time in which you can become a free agent. So it's restricted, it's controlled. The league can manage it because it's only a certain number of players. Any player at any time can become a free agent in college football. You wake up the next day and you don't like the skies in Oklahoma, and you don't, it rained 3 days in a row and you don't like it. You can become a free agent because you just, or you didn't like the food at the cafeteria today. So I'm going to become a free agent. I'm going to enter the transfer portal. Like, they can become a free agent at the drop of a hat. So that's one thing, that there's no restriction to it. Number two, with these NIL deals coming down, let's say some player chooses Texas over USC because they had a better NIL deal. But during the course of their freshman season or the off season, USC then got a better NIL deal. So in year 2, they can then flip to USC and go play there for a year. And then Miami gets a better NIL deal, and they can make a little bit more money there. So then as a junior, they're going to go to Miami. This could, at least there's restrictions and control within the NFL. And my last point, Jason, will be, and this is never going to happen because it's in theory, and I would hope that it, with most of these players, let's understand that they are students first. And I'm not talking about most of the guys that we discuss here as being the top level players, but over the course of all of college football and all the players, there's a very small portion that move on to the NFL. So they better be focused on academics because that's what's going to have to carry them later. But if at this point it's sided to the players so much that if they truly want this to be treated like a business, again, this will never happen because in theory it's student then athlete. But what happens in the NFL? You're not really drafted by the Atlanta Falcons or the Seattle Seahawks. You are drafted by the NFL. And basically what they're doing is saying, you're going to our corporate office in Atlanta. You are going to our corporate office in Los Angeles. You could be a kid who grew up in Florida, always played in Florida, played at Florida State. You're going to play in the Northwest. You're going to play in Seattle. That's where you're going. Mm-hmm. You could be a Southern California kid who never left Southern California, played at USC. You're going to Buffalo. That's where you're going. So if they truly want this to be treated like a business, college football could, and this is a massive undertaking, it's not going to happen, but could consolidate, become a corporation and say, okay, we're going to draft players and then we will send you to school because you're going to school for football. We'll send you where you need to go.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's just it's a strange this is the thing that this is where I go with this. I mean, do I like any of this? Think any of this is great for the sport? No. I mean, I think it's just, it's the rich. I mean, conceivably the rich get richer, but who knows if that's necessarily the case with what happened today. But I think what I try my best to do is first and foremost just almost separate this part of it from the actual game, meaning I still love watching the game regardless of what
Yes.
how these kids go here, how these kids get there, just the love of the game and watch the game. But no, you're exactly right. And it's going to be very interesting in the next few years what happens, what kind of restrictions, that they put in place on any of these NIL deals or wherever it kind of goes from here. If we ever get to a point, and I mean, probably just at some point they'll get to a point where it's going to be a pay for play situation. I at some point, I don't know if that's going to happen in the next 5 years or whenever, but I think at some point the NIL is just going to get so out of control that they won't be able to do it and do that. So, that's why, when you look at some of these recruiting rankings and team rankings, yeah, it's great for Oklahoma to be a top 10 team from a recruiting perspective. But, with the transfer portal, you can get, you could, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Mark. You can make a makeshift team. Yeah, if I strike out on at the prep level with some of these offensive linemen, oh, that's all right. I can go grab 4 or 5 in the transfer portal and give myself some depth or give myself some quality starters. I mean, and I say offensive linemen just because Oklahoma's a little bit struggled a little bit from a recruiting perspective over the last few years. But I mean, any position. I mean, look at the sheer number of outstanding quarterbacks that are in the portal already. Dylan Gabriel, Michael Penix is a guy who just committed a couple of days ago. Max Johnson from LSU, just tons of names out there that and that's just and that's just there's there's great names at every position. So it's one of those situations. Like I said, if you miss from the if you miss at the high school or JUCO level, you don't have to worry about it completely because you can go to the transfer portal. And I'm sure that Oklahoma is going to do this in some capacity based on how things kind of fit through here through this signing period and then the late signing period as well. But I think Oklahoma is going to, I mean, as all teams will, but I think they will solidify some things if they've missed on some areas or they have some additional depth needs at certain areas. That's absolutely going to be something that Oklahoma, as well as any other teams, will do.
Yeah, it is something else. When you talk about the quality of player in the transfer portal, this transfer portal has been around longer than most people realize, but there have been various changes made to it that has made it more functional and more accessible to the player. That's ramped it up here in the last year and a half. Initially, it seemed like a quarterback driven component, mainly because the quarterback's the only position there's only one guy in the field. If you're an offensive lineman and you can't play for your team, and there's 5 starting offensive linemen and probably 2 to 3 other guys that get significant playing time in the rotation, then, you know, then you probably can't play at a like school somewhere else. But at quarterback, you can be stuck behind somebody, and there's only one quarterback on the field. Okay.
Right.
So it was a very quarterback driven situation. And it was reasonable for a long time to see, okay, that player's a good player, but he's stuck behind him and he's making a move. Now we see, Jason, to your point, I'm seeing guys in the portal that I don't know why they're in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know their situations. They could have valid reasons other than football or whatever that are involved. But just based on the football situation, Bo Nix is the starting quarterback at Auburn. That doesn't seem like a bad deal to me. Why? I don't know why he's leaving. Max Johnson is the starting quarterback at LSU. That seems like a pretty good gig. Why is he leaving? Like, more and more I see these guys and I'm like, where's he going? Why?
Yeah, no, I get it. Like, I mean, if you're a Spencer Rattler situation, that's
Sure.
completely understandable. Not a big deal at all. But yeah, I mean, Bo Nix was surprising as well. I mean, both of them. Even Dylan Gabriel was a little bit
Yeah.
surprising as well. I mean, I know he was a little bit injured this year, but yeah, no, I think I'm with you, Mark. It's bizarre seeing some of these names that go into the portal from some of these schools when you're the number one guy, or at one of your positions, or at least the no chance that you probably won't be the starter coming in next year. Then absolutely, yeah. So it's a strange situation, but it's a situation where a lot of these teams will benefit from that, no doubt about it. I mean, Texas A&M might be a team that benefits from it in a big way based on how they're recruiting, and it looks like Max Johnson might be going there. So that's yeah, it's a wild world of college football these days for sure.
In the situation you just alluded to, again, I'm not there. I don't know the intricacies. I don't know exactly what the evaluations are, but I'm going by who gets playing time and what's happened at those 2 schools, LSU and Texas A&M. And I see a situation where Zach Calzada decides to leave Texas A&M. Okay. He lost the job, but it was a very close race with Haynes King in August. He gets in the second or third game of the season because Haynes King gets hurt against Colorado. Calzada finishes the season, has a decent season, not a great season, decent season, 8-4. I'm assuming he's still going to be in competition for the job the next season, but he decides for whatever reason, maybe that he's not guaranteed to be the starter. But I would think, again, it wouldn't be just Haynes King is the guy, because he's not a proven commodity that Calzada would be given a shot, but he decides to move on. Well, Max Johnson steps in. He's going to have to compete with Haynes King for the job as well, and he's leaving LSU, where he was pretty much the starter. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, Mark. Some of these, who knows what some of these kids are thinking. I mean, I'm sure they've got people in their ear telling them, oh, okay, yeah, you can, if you can go here, you might not, you may have to compete here, but if you go here, you're going to be able to walk in and be the starter, and you don't have as much pressure. So yeah, it's weird to understand kind of the thought process of some of these kids when they're thinking about transferring, or just maybe not even wanting to compete.
I know I'm going to say something that's not necessarily popular with a lot of Oklahoma fans based on Spencer Rattler's tenure there, and it's indicated by a ton of comments, but also, and of course, the conversations we've had for the past several months. And also, I put up Christopher's comment about Spencer Rattler. What's he ever done? I'm telling you that Spencer Rattler, what has he ever done? I bet that there are only 10 quarterbacks in the country that are going to be playing in 2022 that have accomplished more than he has at this point, that have won a conference championship, that have thrown 28 touchdown passes in a season,
Right.
those sorts of things. There's only about 10 guys out there that will be playing next season. Number two, he's going to arguably be the best quarterback in the SEC Eastern Division.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Hendon Hooker's more experienced, maybe a little bit more reliable, but he's not more talented. That is a tremendous pickup for South Carolina.
Oh,
They have
absolutely.
upgraded their quarterback position. They were playing walk-ons and graduate assistants.
And they still somehow got to a bowl game.
Yes, that's how good James Beamer might be a really good coach.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that relationship with and Austin Stogner actually had come in
Yes.
there as well from the tight end perspective. But yeah, no, and I think that kind of it shows to the relationship that Rattler has. I think what he needs, perfectly put here on the he needs a very strong, solidified offensive line. I think that's the difference, that he's not going to, he's not going to be a guy that's going to beat you with his feet, but he has, one of the best arms in the country. He's very, he's very accurate, and so yeah, I think having him go to South Carolina with how they've recruited this year, Shane Beamer's got something going there. If they can, solidify that, they have the opportunity to your point, being one of the best teams, potentially in that division next year. Maybe not one of the best teams, but maybe getting into the top half of that division this year, as opposed to where they've been traditionally. And this is probably the best. He's probably on paper the best quarterback that they've had there in a long time.
From a talent perspective, he might be the best quarterback they've ever had. I looked at this when he transferred. From a talent perspective, in terms of recruiting rankings and hype and all that, and he's confirmed it to a certain extent. I know he had a disappointing season this year, but he's confirmed it. It's not like he's still Quinn Ewers, has done nothing. And they've had guys like Steven Garcia, Connor Shaw, that were good little college football players. Like Connor Shaw got every ounce of ability out of him, but he was no Spencer Rattler by any stretch. So they've had a lot of guys like that. Jake Bentley, Dylan Thompson were guys that they could sling it, but this is like an NFL quarterback, most likely.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. There was some thoughts whether he would transfer, to another school or just enter the NFL draft, especially with this being maybe not the strongest quarterback-led NFL draft. But I mean, I think ultimately he made a good decision. He probably wants to have that, doesn't want to have that taste in his mouth and some of the NFL execs' mouth on just exactly how he, how he was able to how he played this year and got replaced. So I think it'll be a good bounce back year for him. And so I think a lot of Oklahoma fans will be South Carolina fans. I think South Carolina fans and whoever is playing USC on any given Saturday.
It's only a question as to whether USC is moved to the top of that list or Texas is still number one and maybe USC is number two now.
Yeah, I think Texas will still probably always be number one, but
Sure.
USC might have jumped Oklahoma State, as that.
I have, unlike most of the people in this chat, I have nothing against Texas. I'm neutral on Texas, Oklahoma, etc. Neutral, but just because of some of the arrogance and audacity and some of just the sheer incompetence at that place over the last 10 years, I almost don't want them to improve at all. I would love to see this Texas situation play in the SEC. I want to see their level of incompetence where they can go out and lose to Kansas. I want to see them play an SEC Western Division type schedule.
Oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that would be funny. Just fun to see. I mean, I think a lot of people here would love to see that, right? But But they're doing Texas is doing what they do every single winter. They're doing what they do. They're stockpiling all these kids. So is the big question is can Sark can Sark do it on the field? Can he, he had about as bad of a first year as you could possibly have at a school like Texas, and so we'll see what happens. I think one thing to note here, I think a lot of people watching this will find this interesting, but looking at the 247 recruiting, specifically talking about USC, Jackson State is ranked 102nd right now with that, obviously with the Travis Hunter kid. USC is ranked 104th. That's just like, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, taking Riley out of the whole situation, I can't imagine a situation where you have a team like that, like Jackson State, that has out recruited by whatever means necessary, but they have out recruited a blue blood team. So I don't know. He's got his Riley certainly has his hands full next year. I think with what he has, it's truly it's truly a build. It's truly a rebuild. It's not necessarily a reload that he's got going on there.
No. Yeah, they've got like pockets of talent on that roster that's really good, but their defense was statistically the worst in the Pac-12. So we flipped Raleek Brown, one of the top running backs in the country. When I checked it yesterday or the day before, that number 104 number also included only 4 hard commits. So he's got a ton of spots to fill. So I don't think it's a bad class. It's just basically not a class
Right.
yet.
Yeah, and you have to assume that they're gonna go deep into the transfer portal here this year. I would assume.
So Jason, I don't know what kind of time you have. I've got about 10 to 15 minutes. There's a question coming in here with Oklahoma having signed 13. Where do we expect that number to land when it's all said and done?
I would assume Oklahoma's probably in the 16 to 17 range. I think could be more. It certainly could be more. I think they have the possibility of signing up to 30 based on the class, based on the size, and obviously it has to do with the number of scholarships that you offer. But with so many of Oklahoma's kids in the current class that are on the current team, I should say, that are either are either declaring for the draft or have already hit the transfer portal. I think Oklahoma has in the 30 range that they could sign. Certainly don't think that they will do that, obviously from a recruiting perspective, but I could see Oklahoma probably anywhere from the 17 to 20 range based on some of these kids, that if they're able to flip them or able to get them in a position where they're comfortable signing in the late signing period.
All right. See a number of questions coming in that deal with topics that we've already hit on. So understand that once the video is completed and we wrap up the live stream, that you can watch it right here at the Voice of College Football. Also, one note here is that we would love to have a sponsor. So if you own a business or you are connected to a business that could possibly benefit from what we do here at the Voice of College Football, we would certainly supply all the numbers regarding the viewership and subscribers and everything that we reach here at our Oklahoma channel. So contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, MarkRogersTV at Gmail, if you would like to sponsor. So Jason, is there anything else out there that you'd like to hit on?
No, not necessarily. I think Oklahoma will probably. We haven't talked a lot about the coaching staff changes. Oklahoma's added a couple of guys. Ted Roof as a defensive coordinator was a little bit of a surprising move. I think from everything that I've heard, he's defensive. He's probably Venables is going to closely be involved in the defensive game plan and probably even calling a lot of the plays. I've heard some things about Ted Roof is really kind of there for player development more so than anything, and even from a recruiting perspective, he's been there. He's been all across the board and kind of ACC, SEC territory, one of the better recruiters. So I think from that prowess, I think he's He's there. Brandon Hall has been added as a safeties coach and probably a special teams coordinator. So Oklahoma's solidified on the coaching staff without they still have two spots that they're looking at, a cornerback and a defensive line coach. So there's some thoughts that Mike Reed and Todd Bates could potentially come over. Those are a couple of the names. So I think Oklahoma has been waiting for after National Signing Day has ended, and then there's some thoughts that maybe if they go a different way, some of the guys that could come over may still be coaching in the college football playoff. So there's some things to work out as far as that, but Oklahoma's getting closer to kind of nailing down what that full staff looks like. And then there's a bowl game coming up here pretty soon, so I'm sure we'll talk about that next week and preview that a little bit more for what Oklahoma looks like, particularly on the defensive side, as they've got 4 opt-outs that are not playing um, in the bowl game, just opting out for the NFL draft. So we'll certainly get into that a little bit more next week.
We'll have to run a poll here gauging everyone's interest in the bowl game. I love the bowl games. I just think they provide matchups that we never see, and we get one additional college football game, but we get one additional college football game of a big program taking on a big program, regardless of the level of disappointment for those two teams for that particular season. When you get Oklahoma and Oregon on the same field, and Kentucky and Iowa and Penn State and Arkansas, and these teams that are quality football teams, quality programs, and they're otherwise not going to play. I just think it's exceptional. And even if you've got a number of opt-outs, then you get to see the next wave of players that are going to be meaningful for 2022. Jason, the other thing that comes to mind with this current state of college football and everything that's swirling and changing by the day is that, in looking at a guy like Brent Venables, and I think he's one of many out there. I don't know the man. I'm only going by surface impressions that he seems to be a very solid, faith-based, strong individual that wants to do things the right way. It's almost like I can imagine when somebody nowadays or for decades past gets into politics with every good intention of doing the right things, changing things, wanting to be honest and do the right things, but you get caught into an environment and just a way of doing business where you have to try to measure your own convictions and values versus this is the way things are done and this is the way people succeed in this business, and it's got to be a difficult thing to navigate.
Oh, it really does. I mean, one of the things that Venables was very clear on, one of the big things that he talked about a lot was loyalty, and he felt like, he has been as loyal as any guy out there, doing this based on, how long he stayed at Oklahoma, how long he was at Clemson, and really this was the one job that he really wanted. So yeah, I think loyalty and faith, to your point, is going to be a big part of the culture at Oklahoma moving forward. So I think he talked a lot about he wants specifically from a recruiting perspective, he wants the offer. He wants the offer to mean something. Oklahoma, and a lot of schools have done this as well. But I mean, I think over the last few years under Riley, Oklahoma has done has really done. I don't know if it's a good job or a bad job or just what it is, but they have had tons of offers out there. And so Venables wants to be one of those programs that, if you get an offer from Oklahoma, like, it really, really means something. And so maybe a little bit pickier and choosier. And, the evaluation has to be even much better than it has ever been. And so he had talked about, as well as, valuing the personal relationships that he has with his players and with the parents and with the staff and all of that stuff that was not always necessarily there previously. So I think it's going to be a different dynamic, much different culture from that perspective, just day to day, and then the recruiting side as well.
He is Jason Ray. He makes this all go here at Oklahoma Sooners Live each and every Wednesday. We come your way at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, so make it on back here next week as we will continue to wrap up the signing class for 2022. Any other news regarding coaching, staff changes and additions, and of course the bowl game against Oregon and everything else that who knows? It's college football 2021. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then that could change the landscape of the game that we all love. Jason, we appreciate you being here. Catch Jason's work, not everybody's work. I think just Jason's work there. Last word on college football. And of course, lock it in here at our Oklahoma channel. Appreciate everybody being here. Jason, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to be going full throttle for the rest of the day. We've got live shows with Michigan at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7, and I'm going to be recording with a number of people, so be looking out for our signing day content here on our various channels, and specifically on the main channel there at the Voice of College Football. We'll see everybody back here next Wednesday.